So guys, welcome to IELTS Fundamentals, the fundamentals of IELTS Writing Task 1. And this lesson is for people doing the academic test and the general training test. Writing Task 1 is completely different for academic and general training. So what I've done is I've put both into this video. I'm going to start off with general training and then I'm going to do academic later. So I'll explain that later in the video. But no matter what you're doing, you're covered with this video. Again, I just want to say thank you for all the kind comments for the previous lessons, for the speaking lesson that we did, the listening lesson, and the reading lesson. It has been, I think we've only had one negative comment for the whole time we've been doing this course, which, if you know anything about the internet, that's pretty amazing. So thank you very much for all the positivity and the really nice comments and emails and everything else. Thanks very much, guys. Okay, so are you doing general training or academic? So task 1 writing is different for each of these. Which one you do will depend on who you are applying to. Please consult them, whoever you are applying to. So for example, if you're a doctor, you're probably going to be doing academic, but you're going to be applying to like the GMC in UK or the Australian equivalent. If you're a student, you're applying to a certain university. If you're just applying to immigrate to a country, check with them which one you have to do. Do you have to do general training or do you have to do academic? I can't answer that question for you. You have to find that out yourself. So this lesson will cover both general training and academic. So the first part, general training, second part, academic. So if you are academic, you're going to just skip forward. If you're doing general training, you'll watch the first half and then just stop when general training is finished. Okay, so what's the main reason why people fail the IELTS test? So I've asked this question to several senior IELTS examiners. So just not just the normal IELTS examiners, people who are in senior positions within the British Council or IDP. And every time I meet them, I'm always asking them, you know, so that I can improve my teaching. And normally what they say is poor task 1. So normally people's reading and listening is pretty good. Sometimes people have problems with speaking. The main problem is writing. And lots of people think that the main reason why they're not getting the score they need is because of task 2. But actually, when you look at the data and when you look at a wide range of students and when you look at their writing, the number one problem and the main reason why they're stuck at a 6 or 6.5 is task 1. It's not actually task 2. Task 2 is very important, but normally the main reason is a poor task 1 performance. And why is this so? Why do people not do very well in task 1? So the first thing is just a lack of attention during preparation. So on my courses, when I used to teach face-to-face in classes, like on my courses, on my digital courses, I can track everybody's activity and I can see the percentage of modules that they've done. And it is very common for people to spend a lot of time looking at the task 2 modules and they're not paying that much attention to the task 1 modules. They think it's not important, so they don't spend enough time on task 1. What I say to my students is spend 50% of your time on task 2 and 50% of your time on task 1. They are not equal in terms of the number of marks you're going to get. Apologies for the construction noises in the background. I'm really sorry. It's where I'm living at the moment. There's a lot of construction. So task 2 is worth 2/3 and task 1 is worth 1/3. But I would suggest that because task 1 is such a problem, that you spend 50% of your time on task 1, 50% of your time on task 2 during your preparation. All right. In the real exam, spend 20 minutes on task 1 and 40 minutes on task 2 to reflect the weighting of the marks. But during your preparation, I think at least you should be spending a little bit more time on task 1. Also, a lot of people do task 2 first in the test, and sometimes they just overrun on the amount of time they spend on task 2, which doesn't leave a lot of time for task 1. Especially task 1 academic, if you don't have the full 20 minutes, you're going to really, really struggle. On the On the flip side of that, what a lot of people do is they do task 1 first, and they just spend way too much time on task 1. And if you spend too much time on task 1, you're more likely to get it wrong because you're overthinking things, you're overcomplicating things, or you're just putting in way too much data or including too many things. So poor time management is an issue with task 1. And this isn't your fault, guys, but there is a lot of conflicting and confusing information out there about task 1. Some people say write a conclusion. Some people say don't write a conclusion. Some people say write an overview. Some people say don't write an overview. Some people say put your overview in the second paragraph. Some people say put it at the end. There's just so much bad information, and then there's so much correct information, but it's confusing and it's conflicting. So that's not your fault. Also, poor teaching. Most teachers who teach IELTS are not actually experts in IELTS. They're doing a good job, they're doing their best, but what they're doing is before they go into class, say they're teaching a class on how to write an overview, they are going to look up books and websites and like teach themselves how to do it before they go into teaching it in the class. So if they are looking at junk and they are looking at bad information, then they're just going to use that information and teach it to you as a student. Most IELTS teachers are not spending the amount of time that I spend on my lessons, where I sit down and come up with my own techniques and think independently about it, and then other teachers just don't even think about it at all, as it gets reported to me on a daily basis. And I'm sure if you've been learning IELTS long enough, you'll know that there's some teachers out there that teachers, even to call them teachers, is quite generous. Okay, so but you're probably thinking, because your friend has told you this or someone else has told you this, but task 1 isn't that important. You're right and you're wrong. Task 2 is worth double the marks that task 1 is worth. But task 1 is still a third of your total writing mark. So again, when I say this to students, they're like, yeah, but that's just a third. Imagine if I took 1/3 of the money in your bank account. Would that be just not that important? So 1/3 maybe doesn't sound that much, but if I took a third of your money every month, let's say I put 33% tax on your earnings, would you be happy about that? No, it's a very, very significant amount. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on general training. All right, so if you are doing the academic, go and skip ahead because this is just not applicable to you and you don't want to waste your time. So only the general training people in this part of this video, and then what I'll do is I'll do academic after that. Okay, so general training format. So you'll be asked to write a letter. This does not change. You will always be asked to write a letter. You're very lucky because this is easier than task 1 academic. I believe this is maybe easier. Easy is not the thing, because it is a challenge for people, because you're writing in a foreign language. So it's not easy, but it's easier than an academic. Academic, they have to deal with, a whole range of different types of questions. You just have to write a letter. There's a lot of conflicting and confusing information out there. Just follow what I say and you'll be fine. The worst thing you can do is look at 5 different websites, 5 different books, and go to 2 or 3 different IELTS teachers. You're going to be very, very, very confused because they're all going to tell you differing things. If your thoughts are confused, your writing is going to be a reflection of that. So either pick my way, or if you don't like my way, go and look at somebody else's, but just follow one person that you trust. Don't look at, many different writing systems. It's not that there's only one way to do something when it comes to IELTS. There are many wrong ways, but there are also many correct ways. So just pick one and you'll be much better off. Okay, so this is an example of, I got this from the official IELTS website. And this is very typical of what you'll see. So the question will give you background information. So you live in a room in college which you share with another student. However, there are many problems with this arrangement and you find it very difficult to work. Okay, so it's basically just giving you the context. It's giving you the information. Then it tells you who to write to. Write a letter to the accommodation officer at the college. Then it will always give you 3 bullet points. Bullet point number 1, bullet point number 2, bullet point number 3. And these, you're going to see why this format is very, very important. You must always write at least 150 words. So 150 words are over. Don't get too caught up in like a perfect number of words. Anything between, for task 1 writing, anything between should aim for like 150 to 200. If you're going way over 200, you're not spending enough time focusing on quality. It's all about quality, not quantity. If you're under 150 words, you're in trouble. But the sweet spot is kind of 150 to 200. And then it'll tell you how to start your letter. So, dear sir or madam, and off you go. So this is really important because it never changes. The format never changes. The information changes, but the format does not change. So the first thing you need to think about is tone. Okay, so first question you have to ask yourself is, it's important that you choose the correct tone. So there are only 2 tones. Other teachers say that there is a 3rd tone, which is called semi-formal. I have never come across the need to use semi-formal. Just keep it really, really simple, formal, informal. That's totally fine to do that. So how do you decide if you're going to write a formal letter or an informal letter? There's a very, very simple way to do this. If the question, so where it says write a letter to, if it says write a letter to your friend, it's informal. For anybody else, your boss, your manager, whoever you're writing to, that's formal, all right? One thing that students do is they put their own experience into deciding this. So the question says something like, so this one, write a letter to your accommodation officer. And what they do, what the student does is like, oh, my accommodation officer, I'm really friendly with them and I know his name. So can I write an informal letter? It's like, no, they don't care about your life experience. What they want you to prove is, can you identify when you should write a formal letter and when you should write an informal letter? If it's to a friend, it's informal. If it's anything else, anybody else, it's formal. Keep it simple. Do not overcomplicate it. Do not comment below, what if I know the manager? If it tells me to write to I know his name and I go to his house and blah, blah, blah. Don't put your own experience on it. If it's a friend, informal. Anything else, formal. Keep it simple. So choosing tone. So this person, write a letter to the accommodation officer. It's not a friend, so it's not informal. It's formal. Really, really simple. For this one, a friend has agreed to look after your house, a pet while you're on holiday. Write a letter to your friend. It'll always say this for informal things. Write a letter to your friend, informal. Anything else, formal. Very, very simple. Strategy and structure. So the format is always the same. This means that you can structure your answers in the same way and apply the same strategy every time. So remember, we talked about before where it always gives you background information, tells you who you're writing to, and then gives you 3 bullet points. That is really good for us because what we can do is come up with a strategy, come up with a structure, and apply that to any Task 1 general training question. So apply this and you'll be at a huge advantage because this strategy, this structure looks after so many different things that can go wrong. It really prevents you from messing up in so many different ways. So just apply this and you'll be way ahead of most people in the exam room. So what is the strategy? So the strategy is, first you're going to look at the information here. All right, so you're going to identify what it is about first. Then you're going to think about what are the different bullet points that they want me to write about. And this is going to form the structure of your letter. So let me show you that in a little bit more detail. So first of all, you're going to start with dear. If it's, it'll tell you who you're going to write to. So if it's your friend, just make up a name. If it is formal, just say dear sir or madam. It'll show you how to do that. Paragraph 1, state purpose of letter. All right, so you're going to look at the background information and you're going to say, I'm writing to, and then tell them why you are writing to them. Why do you do that? Well, A, that's how you should start most letters and emails. like making it clear why you're writing to the person to make it easy for them to understand. And B, you want to make it clear to the examiner that you've understood the question, you've understood what you have to do. So that's your first paragraph. Skip a line. Paragraph 2, bullet point number 1. So if we go back here, so first paragraph, you're going to just mention the purpose, which is here. Second paragraph, you're going to talk about describing the situation. Third paragraph, explain your problems. Fourth paragraph, say what kind of accommodation you prefer. Okay, so paragraph number 2 is bullet point number 1. Paragraph number 3 is bullet point number 2. Paragraph 4 is bullet point number 3. And then you sign off either formally or informally. Again, super simple, super straightforward. Just keep it simple. Use this and you will do very, very well. You obviously have to use good grammar and good vocabulary and develop your ideas and come up with ideas yourself. But this, if you use this, you remove so many obstacles in your way. So the strategy is, this is just going a little bit more in depth. So paragraph 1, state purpose of letter. So all you have to do is just paraphrase what is in the question. So the background information in the question, you just use paraphrasing. Don't paraphrase it exactly how it is. You're obviously going to change a little bit. You're just going to change the words and state what the purpose is. Paragraph number 2, bullet point number 1, write around 50 words. So it doesn't, I'm not saying write exactly 50 words. Some students, when you tell them this, what they'll do is they'll count every single word and they'll be like, you told me to write 50 words. No, around 50 words. The reason why I say around 50 words is A, I want you to develop your main ideas, fully develop them. And B, I want you to get to the word count. Because if your 3 main body paragraphs are around 50 words each, you're always going to go over 150 words. But you must stay on topic. So let's go back and have a look at this question. So the first one, describe the situation. So you're only writing about the situation. You're not writing about anything else apart from the situation. Explain your problems and why it is difficult to work. In that paragraph, all you would do is just explain your problems and why it is difficult to work. And then the next paragraph, all you do is just say what kind of accommodation you would prefer. All right, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So again, around 50 words, stay on topic. Around 50 words, stay on topic. Only talk about what that bullet point is about. Do not talk about what you did last weekend or your favorite breakfast cereal or what the weather is like. Just talk about that. And feel free to be creative. You know, a lot of students come to me and they're like, I just don't know how to write anything. And it's like, you do not have enough faith in yourself. You do have the ability to be creative and to just think of some ideas. It is not that difficult when you put your mind to it. And then sign off, formal or informal. So, read and understand the question. So this is number 1, just read and understand the question. Take a minute just to understand what you have to do. Do not immediately go into writing, all right? Take some time to plan out your answer. If you do that, you're going to save time because you're not going to mess things up halfway through your attempt. Decide if it is formal or informal. And then start your letter. So you've planned everything, you've understood everything, you've decided if it's formal or informal. Start your letter. State purpose by paraphrasing the question. Write paragraph for bullet point 1, write paragraph for bullet point 2, write paragraph for bullet point 3, and then sign off appropriately. Finally, check your tone, and then check vocabulary and grammar. So you have 3 stages really. You have the planning and thinking stage, number 1. Number 2, you have the writing stage. And number 3, you have the checking, the proofreading stage. Because you will make small mistakes and you will pick up on those mistakes. If you do that and you follow that strategy, it should be pretty straightforward. There will not be any question that you get that will be so unusual that you will not be able to write about it. And you have such an easy task compared to the academic guys. Key mistakes that people make for general training. No clear purpose. So people either do not include a purpose at all, and there's no paragraph, or what they do is they just say like, Dear Johnny, isn't the weather lovely, and did you go to the football yesterday evening? And the letter's nothing about that. So dear Johnny, and then say, I'm writing to let you know whatever. and just state that. Make sure you have a clear purpose. Obviously, a big mistake is people do not choose the right tone. So it is an informal letter and they're using formal language or opposite. An even bigger problem is an inconsistent tone. So what happens is a lot of people recognize that it is a formal letter or an informal letter, but what they'll do is they'll use both formal and informal language in their letters. That's an inconsistent tone. So you must make sure that if it's a formal letter, the whole letter is formal. If it's an informal letter, the whole letter is informal. Paragraphing, very, very simple, but very common, where people just do not show where one paragraph ends and the next begins. Skip a line. It's the easiest thing to do in the world. Dear Johnny, or whoever it is, or dear sir, madam, skip a line, state your purpose. Skip a line, first bullet point. Skip a line, second bullet point. Skip a line, third bullet point. Skip a line, sign off, your name, done. Just make your paragraphs really, really, really clear. They're the easiest marks to pick up and the easiest marks to lose. Not developing main ideas. So what a lot of people do is, they don't normally do this for every bullet point, but normally the last bullet point or one of the bullet points, they only write about 10 words or 15 words. Try and write around 50 words. So it could be 40, it could be 60, it could be 45, it could be 55. Around 50 words. Get used to developing and staying on task, staying on topic. Irrelevant ideas. We've mentioned this already. What a lot of people do is they talk about the weather, they talk about what they're doing next weekend, when the question does not ask you to do that. You're not writing a letter to your friend. If it says writing a letter to your friend, you're not doing that like it's your real friend and you're telling them your real news. You're in a test. You're just doing what they tell you to do in the test. So stick to the question. Grammar mistakes for both task 2 and task 1. If you make lots and lots and lots of grammar mistakes in every sentence, you will not get a 7 or above. You have to minimize the number of grammar mistakes that you are making. Same with vocabulary mistakes. This is an even bigger problem because what people do is they try and use vocabulary that they just have no idea how to use properly because they've been given a list of so-called band 9 words or high-level words or golden words or diamond words, I even heard the other day. It's fine to use, a nice range of vocabulary, but it has to be correct. There's no point in using vocabulary that you just have no idea what it means or how to spell it or how to use it in a sentence. So be careful with that. Timing. So make sure you can do this in 20 minutes. So that includes the planning time and the proofreading time. So I don't like to give exact minutes for how long you should plan and how long you should check because students take that too literally and they just stick to that religiously. What I would suggest is, I'm not even going to say it because students are not able to flexibly take that on board. A few minutes at the beginning, you should be planning and thinking. A few minutes at the end, you should be checking your work, and then in between you should be writing. But do make sure you think about your question, and you can use that structure. The structure that I gave you, you could write that out very, very quickly as a little plan. Write your ideas beside it. It's totally up to you. Get into your own style. Find out what works for you. So it's up to you which one you do first. Some people like to do task 2 first, some people like to do task 1 first. Find out by practicing which one works best for you. But make sure you can comfortably get both task 1 and task 2 done in 1 hour. If you can't, you don't have a timing issue, you don't have time management issues, you just aren't ready for the test yet. All right. So if you are practicing and it takes you 2 hours to get task 2 and task 1 done, you don't have time management issues, you have writing issues or language issues. You need to get to, sorry about the construction in the background, really sorry. Until you get to that point where you can say you need a band 7, you should be able to write a band 7 task 1 and a band 7 task 2 in 1 hour. Until you get to that point, you're just not ready. Okay, so now we're going to get into the academic task 1 module. If you are doing general training, you can stop go back and have a look at the strategy, at the structure, apply that to your own writing, apply that during your practice activities, and you'll do very well in your general training. So let's get going with task 1 academic. So you will be given a data source, a process, or map, and you'll be asked to write a report. Not great for what I call oh my god students. Oh my god students are those students who, if they see something they've never seen before, or they get something a little bit unusual, they're just like, oh my god, I can never do this, I've never seen this before. Don't be an oh my god student. Alright. I just have this joke with my students, some of the students, that if you show them anything a little bit unusual or anything they haven't seen before, they get very dramatic, and they kind of feel their test before they even do it, because they just get too stressed out and they're just like, oh my god, I'll never be able to do this. You will see something for task 1 academic, you will see something on your test that you've probably never seen before. You will see something that you will think is difficult. Just accept that. I'm going to make it as easy as possible for you, but get used to dealing with data or dealing with processes or dealing with maps that you've just never seen before. You cannot predict exactly what you're going to get in the task 1 academic test. You just can't do that, so don't even try. So many students get very frustrated with academic task 1 writing. So a common complaint will be something like, I'm a nurse, why do I have to write about how cars are manufactured? Like, this is just stupid. Why do I have to do this? They're not testing your ability to write about cars. It's not a knowledge test. It's not an IQ test. They're testing your ability to look at a source of data or a process or a map and write about it clearly. They are testing your ability to just look at something and then report what you see clearly. Now, in your job as a doctor or as a nurse or as a dentist or whatever it is you do for a living, you're probably not going to have to do the exact thing that is on the task 1 writing paper. Like, it might be a report about how tea is made or something like that. Now, what do they want you to demonstrate? How much you know about how cars are manufactured, how tea is made? No. What they're doing is they're just using that topic as a context for you to be able to demonstrate that you can clearly look at something and clearly write about it. Just like, let's say you're a nurse, you will see the patient's data, you'll see the patient's results, and you'll be able to just look at that and then write an email about it or write a report about it or whatever you have to do. So if you stop thinking in terms of like, oh my god, this is really difficult and why do I have to do this and this is stupid and I don't like this test, you're never going to get anywhere if you have that attitude. But if you have the attitude of, okay, all they want me to do is just demonstrate that I can write clearly in English after looking at something, and I'm going to be able to do that in the test, it becomes much easier. So changing your mindset is really, really effective. So here are some of the things that you might come across when you open up your paper. You might see a line graph, you might see a bar chart, you might see a pie chart, you might see a table, you might see multiple charts of the same kind. So you might see 4 pie charts or 2 bar charts, or you might see a combination of different charts. So you might see a line graph and a pie chart, or a table and a bar chart, some combination of those. Or you might see a process, so a process like a man-made process, like how to make cars or how to make tea or how to make whiskey or something like that. Or a natural process like the weather cycle or how a butterfly is born or something like that. Or you might be shown a map. Maps normally show what something looked like in the past, what it looks like in the present, or what it looks like in the future, and you have to talk about that. Okay, so how I teach this is what I do is I have a whole module on line graphs, a whole module on bar charts, a whole module on processes, a whole module on maps. Will we have time to do that in this fundamentals course? Of course not. It would take way too long. Like my process module is an hour long. My maps module is an hour long. So it gives you an idea. Will I be able to help you in this lesson? Absolutely. I'll be able to give you the foundations and the essentials. But I just want you to know that if you're really having problems with Task 1 Academic and you really want to go a bit further, I would consider looking at each of these individually and looking at them in more depth. So here's an example of what you might get. So this is a bar chart, and the format is always kind of the same. So you'll get a box here, and it'll always say, the second sentence will always say, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. The first part will always give you the background information. It'll give you the context. It will just introduce you to what is happening. And then you'll be given the data source or the map or the process. So why do so many people perform poorly in this area? A lot of people are unfamiliar with this style of writing. Either they just don't have confidence to do it because they're unused to it, or really they just have no idea and they've never done it before. They think they have to know something about the data. This is a huge one. A lot of people look at Task 1 questions and they're like, I know nothing about, so what's this one about? It's about further education in Britain. They're like, I know nothing about that. You don't need to know anything about that. They're not testing that. They're testing your ability to look at the data and report the data. There's a lot of confusing and conflicting information out there. I think this area, more than any other area of IELTS, has the most confusing and conflicting information. Many teachers follow this confusing and conflicting information blindly. When a teacher is teaching an IELTS class, normally they're not an IELTS expert. Normally what they do is, if they're teaching, let's say, how to write an overview for a bar chart, they'll just go and Google that before class and look at a few blogs and then just, copy that and teach that to the students. So if they are looking at junk, if they're looking at bad information, then they're going to be teaching bad information. Very few teachers sit down for a long time and try and think independently about what is the best solution for their students. And there's no one strategy that will enable you to answer any question. So there are so many different types of question, and there are so many things that you could get. There's so many different data points and different bits of information that it's not like general training Task 1, where we can just apply one strategy to any question and we just do it that way and always apply it that way. It doesn't work like that. Same with Task 2. Task 2, we generally know what's going to happen, and depending on the question, we can have a strategy for all the different types of questions. With Task 1 Academic, you have to be far more flexible because you are not guaranteed a set format of questions. The data could be on anything, so you have to have that flexibility. Students hate that. And you'll probably hate me right now because you're like, just tell me one trick or just tell me one strategy and then I'll be able to just do it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that because I cannot predict what the data will say. I wish it was different, but that's just the way it is. The students who accept that do very, very well. The students who don't accept that and they're just like, oh, I don't like this and I'm never going to be able to do it, they never do it. So here's an overall strategy. So I mentioned just 10 seconds ago that there is no one strategy or one structure that you can apply to every single type of question, but there is like an overall structure, all right? It's going to be slightly different for bar charts and pie charts and line graphs and processes, but here's just an overall structure and strategy that we're going to talk about for the rest of this lesson. So paragraph 1, we're going to put the introduction in. Paragraph 2, we're going to write an overview. Paragraph 3, we're going to write details. Paragraph 4, we're going to write further details. Now, there is a huge amount of controversy in the IELTS world about whether something is an overview or whether it's conclusion or where you put your overview. Let me clear that up for you. A lot of people call the overview a conclusion. Why do they do that? They don't really know much about IELTS and they just see it as the last paragraph and they call it a conclusion. A conclusion is in Task 2. A conclusion is a summary of your main ideas. It's a summary of your opinion. Task 1 has no ideas. It has no opinion. It's just reporting what you see. So it's technically you do not have a conclusion and we call it an overview. All right. Where you put that overview, Not important, all right? So I put it in paragraph 2 because I just think it's much easier to write it there, and it's much easier to think about it in that way. But if you want to put it in paragraph 4, so just bump it down to the bottom, that's totally fine as well. It is not a maths question. It's not like if you know, like maths, 2 plus 2 equals 4. There's only one way to do that. Writing is completely different. There are many, many correct ways of doing things. So this is the general strategy and the general structure that we're going to use. 5-step plan. Okay, so what I've done is broken this down for you so that it's a wee bit easier to understand. So understand the question fully, then write your introduction, then pick out the key features and write your overview, then write your details paragraph, and then check your work. All right, so think about this. It is a complicated thing, but what I'm trying to do here is just simplifying it as much as possible, making it as straightforward as possible for you. So number 1, look at the question, understand the data, understand what is happening. The number of students who just don't do that is unbelievable. Write your introduction, I'm going to show you how to do that. Write your overview, I'm going to show you how to do that. Write your details paragraph, I'm going to show you how to do that. And then we'll talk about checking work. So the introduction. So all you have to do is just simply paraphrase the question. So you're not going to paraphrase this bit. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. You're not going to do that. What you're going to do is you're just going to look at this first bit. It will always be in a separate paragraph. Might be 1 sentence, might be 2 sentences. But just take this information and paraphrase it. And that's your introduction. All right, 1 separate paragraph, very, very simple. So paraphrasing, we will work on this more in the task 2 lesson, but it simply means using different words to write a sentence with the same meaning. So the sentence should have the same meaning, but with some different words. The meaning must be the same. That's not negotiable. You can't just put in some words that mean something different and just say, yeah, but it kind of means the same. No, it has to mean exactly the same. The words should be different. But you don't have to change every single word. This is where students lose a lot of time and make a lot of mistakes. They think that they have to change every single word. There are some words that you just can't change. And we'll look at that in a bit more detail. So let's look at a good student example. So here's the question and here's their paraphrase. So let's look at the question. The chart below shows the number of men and women in further education in Britain in 3 periods and whether they were studying full-time or part-time. So let's look at how they've changed that. So they've changed the chart below to the graph displays. So they've changed chart to the graph, and they've changed below to shows. They've changed shows to displays. They've just took out below. You don't need to put that in if you don't want to. Then what they've done here is they put the number of, and they've copied that. All right, so many teachers and many books and many things will tell you that when you're paraphrasing, you cannot copy any words, and that's a big no-no. Well, what this student has done is they've copied it. The reason why they've copied it is because they just couldn't think of a way to change it. Now, what would be another way to approach that? Another way to approach that would be to A, spend 5 minutes trying to think of a different way of changing the number of, and then you're going to mess up your whole thing because you run out of time. Or another way would be to guess a way to change the number of based on something that you're not 100% sure of, which is pretty much going to guarantee that you make a mistake. So what they've done is they've copied it, and that's absolutely fine because some words you just won't be able to change. They've changed men and women to males and females. They've changed further education to tertiary education. They've copied education, but don't look at the word as a single word. Look at it as a collocation. So further education, that's a collocation, 2 words that go together. And they've changed it to tertiary education. So that's demonstrating that you're aware of collocations and you actually have a nice range of vocabulary. Just because they've repeated the word education it doesn't matter, because you're not looking at it as a single unit, you're looking at it as a collocation of two words. They've changed Britain to England, Scotland and Wales, because that's what it is. Please don't get into an argument with me about what Britain is and what the UK is and whether Ireland is included. I'm Irish, I know what it is, so please don't. Students love to do that. Anyway, whether they were studying in 3 periods. All right, so they've changed 3 periods to 3 time periods. So again, they're introducing a different collocation. All right, so they couldn't think of a way to change 3 periods, so they've changed it slightly by putting in time periods, and that's fine to do that also. And if they were studying full-time or part-time. So they've copied full-time, part-time, because there's no other way that they could think of expressing that. They just couldn't think of anything else. And we're going to look at a bad example of when the student has tried and failed to change it. But what they've done is they have changed studying full-time or part-time to full-time or part-time students. Again, changing the language around, showing collocation, showing that they are aware of collocation, aware of how to use grammar properly, and that is actually a very, very good example. Many of you who have been told that you cannot repeat any words will be looking at this and going, you're crazy. You can't just copy words, you're not allowed to do that. If you believe that, then that's fine, I'm sorry. But this is actually very, very good from this student. Okay, let's look at a poor student. So this student has changed every single word. Every single word is different, but let's see what happened. So the data exemplifies. So they've just tried to be very fancy there and use exemplifies instead of shows. It's not actually accurate. So what they've done is, remember the person before, and they just kept the number of because they couldn't think of anything. What they've done here is they put the frequency of. Now, what they've done is they think that frequency and number is a synonym, and it kind of is, but they don't mean the same thing. So that's a big mistake. Then what they've done is they've changed men and women to girls and boys. And they think that that's, they're synonyms, so why not? They're not, all right? They're not, the meaning is completely different. A man and a boy are 2 different things. A woman and a girl are 2 different things. Then they've changed further education to schooling, all right? So they couldn't think of a way to change further education. So instead of just copying it or using 3rd level education or tertiary education or something like that, they put in schooling. Schooling can mean absolutely anything, okay? So schooling can mean kindergarten, primary school, further education, anything. It's just not precise enough. And then they've changed Britain to the UK. That's wrong. They're 2 different things. And then what they've done is they've changed 3 periods to 1970 to 1991. Again, that's incorrect. It's not showing data from 1970 to 1991. If you look at the graph, that's not what it's showing. Then they've changed full-time to permanent, incorrect, and part-time to casual, again, incorrect. So what this person has done is they've been told you cannot change any words. And they have forced themselves to guess, and they've got lots of things wrong. So many students might look at this one and go, oh, that's really good. The language is really nice, and it's really high-level vocabulary. It's wrong, though. But this one, what a lot of students will do is they'll look at this one and they'll be like, oh, this person has copied a word. It's wrong. It's not like that. It has the same meaning. It's accurate, and that's much, much better than that one. And we'll work more on paraphrasing in the module on task 2. Okay, so we've done our introduction. Now we need to skip a line and start our overview. This is the most important part of your task 1 response. If you do not pick out the key features and include them clearly in an overview, you will not be able to get a 7 or above. I'll repeat that. If you do not pick out the key features and include them clearly in an overview, you will not be able to get a 7 or above. All right, it's so important. It's mentioned in the official marking criteria that you must have a clear overview that includes the key features. Many of you, the number 1 reason why you keep getting a 6 or 6.5 might be this particular thing. It might be something else, but for many people, it's just because you cannot write a clear overview. There is a huge amount of bad information out there on how to write an effective overview. Let's look at some. So if you look at most books, if you look at most websites, if you listen to most teachers, what they'll do is they'll just say, oh, to write a good overview, just look for the biggest and the smallest, or the highest and the lowest, or the biggest differences, or the highs and the lows. Or what I read recently, a student showed me, was they said to a student, look for an interesting angle. Whether something is interesting or not is not judged in Task 1 Academic. So it shows you how many silly things there are out there. But the problem with this is some of these might be the key features some of the time, but not all the time. So if you look at every question and you're always looking for the biggest and the smallest and the highest and the lowest and the biggest differences, sometimes you might be right, but most of the time you won't be. All right? Questions are not that predictable. It is training you to look for specific things rather than the actual key features. So it's pre-programming you to look for specific things such as the biggest and the smallest instead of you actually looking and thinking about the data and judging it for yourself. So it's teaching you to think like a robot and apply objective criteria to a subjective data source. And that is a very, very bad idea. So when we're thinking about key features, a good differentiation is to think about if the data is static or if it is dynamic. Whether the data is static, so particular points in time, or dynamic over a period of time, like from 1991 to 2002 or something like that, can make a big difference to your overview. If the data is over a period of time, we normally look for general trends. So if it is, let's say, a line graph from one point in time to the next, you're normally looking at general trends from the start to the end. And we'll look at this in more detail. If the data is static, we would normally not look for general trends. We'd be looking for other things. So let's look at this one. If we were to look at this data source, the first question we would ask ourselves is it static or is it dynamic? So static would just be one point in time. This starts at 2003 and goes all the way up to 2012. So this is dynamic. It's data that is changing over time. The purpose of the graph is not to show you particular points in time. The overall purpose of the graph is to show you the general trends from 2003 to 2012. So very likely, these are going to be our key features. This one is not showing you over time. It's showing you two particular points in time. It's showing you 2002 and it's showing you 2010. It isn't showing you any information in between those 2 points, just those 2 points. Therefore, it is not dynamic data, it is static data, all right? It's 2002 and 2010, not 2002 to 2010. So for this one, we're not looking at general trends. What we're looking for are other things. And it's also divided into different categories. So we're going to be thinking of the different categories. We're going to be thinking of the 2 points in time. And we're going to be looking at all of the data together and then coming up with our key features. So picking out key features. Judge each question on its own merits. All right? Do not apply fixed rules to data that is constantly different and constantly going to be changing. Look at the data based on what you see on the paper, not what you have learned before, all right? Not looking for the highest, the lowest, the biggest differences, all of those different things, because if you're doing that, you're going to pick out the wrong things. Do not apply objective criteria to subjective data, all right? Objective criteria are things like highest, lowest, biggest differences, all of those different things. But that is objective, but what you're looking at is subjective. It's always changing. It's based on its own merits. So always look at it on its own merits. You will hate this, but there's no other way. I know that you're going to be saying to me, just give us some rules. Just give us a strategy. I really wish that existed, but it just doesn't exist, guys. If you want to use the biggest and the lowest and the highest and all of those different things, go and try and do that, but it doesn't work. Look at the data and pick out the 2 to 4 most significant features. If you could only mention 2 to 4 things, what would you say? So imagine you are talking to a colleague or talking to a classmate or something like that, and they show you the data or they show you the process or they show you the map, and they said, only tell me 2, 3, or 4 things about what you see. What are the most significant things about what you see? What would you say to them? If you think about it that way, it becomes much easier to pick out the most important information, the most significant information, the key information. So if you want to improve your ability to pick out key features, here's a little thing that you can do that's very, very effective. Find a reliable source of sample task 1 reports. So it could be me, it could be another teacher, but find someone who really knows what they're doing and has a lot of sample answers. Attempt to pick out the key features yourself. So don't look at the sample answers, just look at the question and try to pick out the key features. 2 things, 3 things, 4 things. It's always different depending on the data, but have a look and try and pick those out yourself. And then compare it with the sample answer, with the reliable source. I put reliable in here because if you're using unreliable sample answers, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. Repeat for multiple questions and multiple different types of questions. So look at a lot of bar charts, look at a lot of pie charts, look at a lot of tables, look at processes, look at maps, look at combinations of those. You have to really practice this because it's a skill, and if you do not understand how to do it and you do not practice it, you'll have no hope of doing it in the real test. And then write your overview. So you picked out the key features, write your overview. So for this one, how I would think about this is, okay, so this is a dynamic chart. It is from 2003 to 2012. So what we're going to be looking for are the general trends. So we're not going to be looking for what happened in each year. What we're going to be looking for is what's the difference between the start and the end. And this is only for line graphs over time. Obviously, different data sources, you'll think about them in different ways. But for burglary, it decreases. All right, it starts up here, ends up down here. Car theft, it increases. Starts here, ends up here. Robbery stays the same. Starts just above here, and then ends up just above here. So what you've done is you've just simplified everything. You have taken a graph and you're probably like, okay, it goes up and then it goes down and then it goes up again and then it goes like you don't have to think in detail for your overview. Your overview doesn't include any detail. Overall, burglary decreased dramatically over the entire period. Car theft increased, and despite some fluctuation, robbery remained relatively unchanged. See how simple that is? How easy it is if you simplify it and you don't overcomplicate it? One went down. Basically, what I've said is, one went down, one went up, one stayed the same. One went down, one went up, one stayed the same. Those are the key features. Those are the general trends. No data. You're not including any data in your overview. That is next. So you have completed your introduction, skip a line, picked out your key features and included your overview, skip another line, and now let's get into the details. And obviously, I'm just reiterating this, this is going to be different for all the different types of data sources. So just do not think that you can apply general trends, one goes up, one goes down, one stays the same, to any question. They're always going to be different. So now you're going to support your overview with details. Think of your task 1 report as going further and further into detail. So introduction, just generally, no detail at all really, just this is what it's about. Overview, this is a summary of the key features. So you're going into a little bit more detail, but again, it's more a summary. And then you're going into details. So here are the details of the most important features. So you have not much detail at all, a little bit more detail, and then you're really getting into detail. So this is why I order the paragraphs. The introduction first, then the overview, then the details, because it's just a more logical way to think about it. But you will not write about everything. So the details paragraph, one of the key mistakes that students make is they write about every single point of data. You're not going to do that. It is essential that you organize your data in a logical manner. So it's not good enough just to look at the data and write everything you see. You must think about how you organize it and organize it in a logical way. In other words, how are you going to make it easy for the reader to understand? Always think of the reader. This is key for both task 1 and task 2. Why are you writing? Why do we write anything? We write to clearly communicate with someone reading it. Clearly communicate with the reader. Make it easy for the reader to understand what you're saying. If you think about it that way, you will organize your details in a far more logical way that is clear and easy to understand. Remember that they are testing your ability to clearly report what you see. That's all Task 1 Academic is. Can you understand the data, and then can you write it clearly? If you think about it that way, it becomes much easier to do. So let's look at this one as an example of how to logically organize your details paragraphs. So what a lot of students do, and this might sound silly, but students do it all the time, is what they'll do is they'll just start writing about this, then they'll write 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 about this. Or just do it, or do it randomly. Like they'll write about this data point, then they'll talk about this, and then they'll go back here, and then it's just very, very, very difficult to understand what they're trying to do. A better way is to look at the data and think to yourself, what is the most logical way for me to organize this so that it's easy for the examiner, for the reader to understand. So look at there's different ways that we could think about this. We could maybe split it up and talk about no high school and high school, and then in the second paragraph talk about college and bachelor's degree and postgraduate. Maybe do it that way. Another way that we could do it would be maybe split up 2002 and 2010. So we talk about the data for 2002, and then in the second paragraph we talk about the data for 2010. Think about it logically. Think about it. What is the easiest way for you to write about it? And always think of the reader. So here's one details paragraph for this graph, just to show you what it would look like. So what I've decided to do is I've decided to organize my details paragraphs by, I'm going to talk about burglary first, and then I'm just going to talk about car theft and robbery in the second one. This one's pretty easy to organize. The one before would have been a little bit more difficult. But what I've done is I've looked at this, so I'm looking at burglary, and I'm not going to report every single data point. I'm not going to talk about every single year. So what I've done is I've kind of split it up into 4. So I split it up into 2003 to 2004, and then I'm going to talk about 2004 to 2008, and then I'm going to talk about 2008 to 2009, and then I'm going to talk about 2009 to 2010. You see how you can just split things up, and then you can talk about the most important things. So the number of burglaries started the recorded period at just under 3,500, just here. It increased slightly to around 3,750 in 2004. Then there was a sharp decline every year, year on year, from 2004 to 2008. So until it reached a low of just over 1,000 incidents in 2008. It then increased slightly to just over 1,500, or just below 1,500, sorry, the year after, and remained relatively stable until 2012. Alright, so what I've done is just describe the data for burglary, alright, in one paragraph. All the data is accurate, and it makes sense, and it's easy to understand, and that's what your goal should be. So again, reminding yourself of the strategy. Paragraph 1, write the introduction. Paragraph 2, write your overview, and then write your 2 details paragraphs. And the 5-step plan: understand, introduction, overview, details, and then check your work. All right, proofreading, and also checking the data and checking your key features and checking all of these different things. So what should you check? Did you pick out the correct key features and include them in a clear overview? This is number 1, all right? When you're checking, did you do this? This is the most important thing that you need to do. Did you paraphrase the question in your introduction? So did you do that accurately? Are your details organized logically? Are they easy to understand? Are your details accurate? So if we go back here, what you'll be doing is you'll be checking the data. So what you'll be doing is checking the years and checking the data and making sure that the data is accurate. If you write inaccurate data, obviously you're going to lose marks. And then, did you make comparisons where relevant to do so? So in some questions, it will be very obvious that what they want you to do is they want you to compare different data. In other questions, you won't. Is your grammar accurate and is your vocabulary accurate? Okay, a note on timing for task 1. One common mistake that I hear from students is that they spend far too much time thinking and writing task 1. This happens a lot. What happens is they start their writing test, they start task 1, and they spend about 30 minutes on it. The result is that you overthink and make it more complicated than it needs to be, and you eat into the time you need for task 2. All right, so if you don't have enough time for task 2, you've just messed up task 2, which is 2/3 of your test. If you spend too much time on task 1, the person who spends 35-40 minutes on task 1 normally doesn't write as good of a report as someone who spends 20 minutes. This person who spends 35-40 minutes on it is overthinking everything. So what do I mean by that? So if we go and look at here, what they would do is they would look at this data and they'd be like, okay, this goes up here and this goes in this. I'm trying to compare here and do this, and they're just overthinking it and overcomplicating it. Whereas the person who does it in 20 minutes will be like, okay, one goes down, one goes up, one stays the same. Okay, that's it. And just that's that simple. Keep it simple, guys. The people that understand this, and like one of the things that I used to do with students in my class when I was at the British Council was I would give students a really good task 1 sample answer, like beyond band 9. And what they would always say is, oh, this isn't very good, it's too simple. Like they think that the reason why they are failing is because the test is really complicated, and what they need to do is do more complicated things in order to get a band 7 or a band 8 or a band 9, when the opposite is true. The way that you get a band 7, the band 8, the band 9 is by writing everything very clearly and realizing that task 1 is not that difficult, but you are overcomplicating it. If you can't write a band 7 task 1 and a band 7 task 2 in 1 hour, you're not ready. You're not going to miraculously get it in the test. So don't do the test until you are ready. If you need a band 7 and you can't in 1 hour in practice get everything done in 1 hour and write everything to a band 7 level, you're never going to be able to do that in the test. It's not like some magic fairy dust is going to be, sprinkled over you in the real test. It just doesn't work like that. Make sure you understand everything and you get everything done and you get consistently to the level you need to be at before you do the test. So I hope you enjoyed that lesson on task 1 writing, and it helps you understand what the examiners are looking for so that you can give it to them on test day. But just looking at that is a waste of time if you don't put it into practice. So how do you put it into practice? You write a task 1 response. So if you download the PDF below, you just click the link below, download the PDF. It's going to give you a task 1 question. Do it under exam conditions, and in that PDF there's also instructions about how to send it to us and get feedback on your writing. It's absolutely crucial that you do this. Writing is a skill. If you don't do this, if you don't practice a skill, does that skill improve? If you don't get feedback on that skill, are you going to improve even further? No. So it's absolutely essential. It's totally free.